Ori and the Blind Forest is a game that I've been enthralled by since starting it. After seeing some of the original trailers for this game, it was clear that the game's art style would be wonderful, and the presentation would be killer. But the question remained, would the gameplay hold up to the same standard? And luckily, the gameplay works as well as the visuals do. A game that within the first 4 hours of gameplay has delivered on almost every level for me, and is a game that I can highly recommend at the price of $20, even at the point I am in the game. I'm about a third of the way through the game at this point, so keep that in mind as I go into the first impressions of this new game for the PC and Xbox One. But please note, I did this review on the PC version. At this time, there are indications that the Xbox One version has some problems regarding display issues and performance with the Instant On feature, so please keep that in mind. Let's start with the story. Without spoiling too much of the plot, let's just say that the plot is equal parts depressing and uplifting, and that's a good thing. The tale plays out as a young orphan goes on a journey to restore life to the world by collecting various items to unlock powers of the world. You've heard this basic plot description of this before in other games, but Ori does it so spectacularly, you'll probably won't even notice. It reminds me a lot of Pixar and Disney films in its presentations of events and narrative. If you're one to tear up over sad things, this game will make you cry in the first 20 minutes, let's just put it that way. However, you'll also smile as some of the more touching moments the game has you go through, and it pulls on the heartstrings, does a great job of getting you through the story. What's done well is the integration of the storytelling as well. As you run across an area and a disembodied voice starts talking, while text appears on the screen explaining what he is saying, you feel involved. You feel like you are involved in the story at all points, and it has gotten you hooked to continue listening to him. Do I really need to talk about the visuals here? I mean, the game's art speaks for itself. Animations are fluid, and characters come alive with every motion that takes place here, even down to the smallest of details. From the animation of saving at the save well, to the beautifully animated cutscenes. The art stands out, with the neon colors working well with the environments and surprisingly not hindering gameplay at all. It stands out like Studio Ghibli did. It has a very unique style and presentation that gives it a sense of wonder, and yet grounds the player in the environments and world that it's going for. It doesn't get in the way of gameplay either, which could be a problem for a beautiful game like this at times, but not so here. And the haunting yet satisfying music. Appropriate to almost every scene and location in the game, the audio work has to be commended on almost every level. Just listen to this. The jumbled text of the characters speaking brings back memories of Midna from Twilight Princess in a great way, as I was hooked on every word of dialogue that was coming out despite not being able to understand the jumbled syllables. I really want the soundtrack on my phone for this game. I can listen to this for hours. But let's get to gameplay, which is what I was initially worried about when I first saw the trailer. I mean, it's a natural conclusion I sadly jump to with these type of games, due to so much attention being put on the art portion that sometimes the gameplay suffers. Not the case for Ori though. The platforming here is really solid. Controls are great for the controller. Now look, I feel like it was designed for the controller, as the keyboard and mouse feels a tiny bit unnatural with the timing portion for some of the later levels and abilities, but the controller is perfect for this type of game. You'll jump, double jump, and fling yourself across the assortment of maps that you'll run across. Controls are responsive without being too forgiving. You have enough control to get you through sections and harder areas without being able to recover easily from making mistakes. There's a couple of portions that make up the gameplay. First is the platforming. The game does a good job of switching up its platforming sections, from dodging lasers and having to time your moves, to using the walls and jumping from wall to wall with precision. While it will reuse hazards in a variety of ways, it hasn't felt the same in any section so far, despite the reuse of elements. In the second portion of the game goes underwater for a little bit, and despite my hatred for underwater levels, was still fun, mostly because it doesn't slow gameplay down. You get new abilities that are tested repeatedly once you get them, and are mixed up with the other abilities rather well. There's a good use of in-game learning mechanics here. The game reinforces the elements that it tries to teach you very well, and will also test you on their mastery in a reasonable amount of time. Very good elements of game design are here. The combat on the other hand is a little bit weaker, but it's not by much. You get the ability to fire projectiles at your enemies, and the main portion of combat is more about avoiding your enemies' projectiles and attacks than you focusing on hitting them due to the homing nature of your bullets. It's possibly the weakest part of the game, but that isn't saying much. It punishes you for not paying attention basically. You have some other advanced tactics by using one of your energy bars to do a super attack, but other than that it's pretty basic. and you will have an occasional stronger enemy to deal with as well. It's not the major focus of the game, but I do wish that it had a little bit more variety in this section, which is one of the only negatives I really have about the game at this point. Some more advanced tactics would have been appreciated. This game is difficult at times, in particular with the precision on platforming, and I'm loving it. It's not the kind of unbelievable difficult that makes you throw your controller, but the precise platforming needed at times is refreshing. It helps that you can use your energy to create a checkpoint to help respawn you quickly against some of the more difficult parts of the game. You will die, but honestly, it never feels like the game was the one that caused it. It was you being impatient or pressing the wrong button, which is key in doing these sections over and over and over again. I suck at games at times. One of the negatives that I've seen thrown at this game is a lack of innovation in the platforming genre, and I'm really not understanding that. A solid game that presents things in a great way should be enough, but even then, I would argue that point in itself. The ability to use your opponent's bullets and projectiles to fling yourself across the map, that is something I don't remember seeing before in the genre, at least nothing that I've played in a while. In fact, there's times that you don't want to kill your enemies in question, which was a little bit strange at first until you realize why. It's actually nice for the game to mix it up on you like that. I don't think that innovation is necessary for a game that's done solid and done right, but I still think there's a really good mix of fresh ideas for this game. Honestly though, there is one thing that I really want to highlight about this game, the bigger set pieces of the game. The following sequence that I'm about to show you is awesome. Using a skill that you just recently got to the best of your ability, combined with a variety of enemies and jumps that you have to make, with the rushing water ready to take you under at that point, it's tense, it's action-packed, and just when you think you're about to die, you somehow make it through, or vice versa. Games, you want memorable moments or set pieces in your game, this is how you do it. The player feels involved at every turn, feels the suspense you are going for, with him being directly involved in the conflict to make it happen. Take note of this, Resident Evil Revelations 2. Yes, I had to work in a shot at that game into this review because a game of this type knows the elements of storytelling and gameplay interaction so much better than the guys over at Capcom. Take note, guys, this is how you do immersion. In the end, Ori and the Blind Forest is exactly the type of game that I love. Solid mechanics, solid gameplay mixed in with a good variety, in addition to some wonderful storytelling and a great use of art and music to set the tone of the game is going for. For 20 bucks, I am more than happy with my purchase at this point, and you'll be damn sure that I'll be playing through it through and through, despite my busy video schedule on my own channel. Needless to say, you've probably heard a lot of positives about this game. They are right. This game is a keeper.